This is my Traxxas Slash. It's the little one, the 1/16 scale version. I've always been in two minds about this car. It's undeniably capable, despite a notable tendency to grip roll, and I love the care that Traxxas have evidently put into the design when it comes to sealing out water and grit. Why is it then that I so rarely drive this car? It occurred to me that if I liked the way the car looked a little more, I might fall back in love with it and start to drive it more often. Then I discovered that ProLine do what they call a rat rod body, in Lexan sadly, for the 1/16 E-Revo, which shares a chassis with the Mini Slash. ProLine include these stickers, but the body itself I quite like. In my usual fashion, I've used a thin marker pen to delineate where I'm going to cut the thing. I always think it's wise to do that rather than just grabbing the Dremel as soon as you open the box. I'm a little saddened and disappointed by the way ProLine have chosen to do the lights. Basically we get the top 2/3 of a light on either side, and then the underside's all hollow and horrible. Do you know what? I'd rather they hadn't included lights. I could have improvised my own lights and they had given me this nice flat radiator grille all the way down, because that's just not very good. Still, I love the texture on the grille. That was clever of them. Love these louvers. Like their work with the line of the top of the hood, the way you can see that it's supported. It's clearly meant to be a fabric hood. Integral tank's a bit naff. Still, they've done what they had to do. Let's cut it out. That's better. I've just hacked it out roughly. You see what I mean about the headlamps not being very full depth. Okay. Let's see how it looks on the body. Well, the first thing is that this aerial is going to annoy me, so I might end up having to go 2.4 gigahertz. The other thing is my absolutely enormous Leopard speed controller is going to have to find somewhere else to live or be replaced with a smaller one. Another point for our consideration is that this is to be a rat rod, which means it will be finished in a rusty scheme, and this is supposedly a cloth top, so that will have to be matte as well. Everything will have to be matte, and that means it can't be painted from within, as is usual with Lexan bodies. I'm going to have to paint the outside of this thing. I don't want to sacrifice the window masks for the outside, because I think I'll need them for the inside, because I like to give Lexan bodies a coat from within as well, just in case, well, inevitably the outside paint chips off. At least the colour's dark, even though you've got a bit of a shiny patch. So what I propose to do is carefully cut around the protective film that comes on these bodies, leaving it on the windows. Peel the rest of the film off, paint my body, and then peel off the masking from both within the body and from outside. I will of course be masking off my headlamp lenses as well. So I went ahead and cut with a scalpel on the outside around each window, and then I peeled off all the film except that which remained adhering to the outside of the windows. After that I used the mask that ProLine supplied on the inside. I'm ready to spray the inside of the grille and the inside of the roof. While the black paint on the roof and the grille dries, I thought I'd have a look at the chassis. To get this ready to wear that body, there are two things I need to do. get rid of that aerial and get rid of the bull bars. The aerial, the easiest and best way to get rid of it would be to change to 2.4 gigahertz, but I can't justify that to myself. I've got 2 RC cars and 2 RC boats with no radio at all, and to let them to jump the queue and buy a new 2.4 gigahertz system just because the aerial's ugly, no, it's not on. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to have to move the aerial to somewhere near the back, so that rather than sticking up through the cab, it sticks up through the little pickup bed at the back. That's not too much of a problem. Removing the bull bars, that's never usually quite as complicated as it is with this little thing. At the back, these 2 retaining screws or bolts are very long, and they go right through some of the suspension components. So I'll just take them out, and if necessary I'll have to use some little nuts or spacers or something to compensate for the thickness of the bull bar mount itself. At the front, things are more complicated. On the tiny photo that comes on the packet with the body from Lexan, you can see that this part's still fitted. So they've removed this. Well, that doesn't look difficult until you look at it closely. It's very hard to see how to get it off without... I think I'm going to have to take the whole front body mount off and then have a look at it. I've removed all the masking, except of course that on the inside and outside of the headlight lenses. So now I can go ahead and just spray the whole inside of the car with some sort of dark, rust-friendly colour, whatever I can find that seems suitable. I've painted the inside with a variety of vaguely rusty hues. It's jolly lucky I'm planning to paint this again, because somehow I got some terrible black bleeding down onto the body colour. If this were my finished result, I'd be very upset right now. But luckily I am planning to paint the whole thing with matte paints from the outside. I stood this gigantic 60 amp Leopard speed controller up on edge in hopes of getting it to fit under the body, and then I moved the switch to a place which I thought would be accessible once the body's fitted. After I araldite it on, I realised that it's got horrible, nasty wiring. That's on the verge of going. So that was a waste of time gluing that on. It's a little bit disheartening. Still, here's the finished painted body. Taken all the masking off. I made a mistake at the back. I completely forgot to mask up the inside of the back lights, which means I'm going to end up having to use the stickers that ProLine so thoughtfully provided. I showed a little more forethought at the front. The lenses are clear, which means they need light buckets. If I take one of these and just push it into place for a moment, it gives a reasonably convincing headlight. To make these headlamp buckets, I take a piece of aluminium foil and a marker pen and form the foil around the pen. Once I've got the shape I want, I trim it back with a pair of scissors. I've put the light buckets in. And given them a blodge of paint to try and make them less conspicuous. I succeeded after a lot of faddling around in drilling the 4 holes in the appropriate positions and getting the body on. Just after I finished, it suddenly struck me that I'd missed a trick here. I'm used to working with opaque, hard ABS bodies and don't often work with Lexan. Of course, with Lexan what you do is you drill the holes before you paint it. That had never occurred to me. It would have been so easy to get it right, and it's just taken 20 minutes and a lot of paranoia and worry to get it right. So at least it's done. The next thing I have to do is mount the antenna for this 27 megahertz radio to here. It's the only place I can think of, and in preparation I've nibbled away a bit with a Dremel at the lower side on your screen of the body mount. Let's see if I can get a finger on it. There you go. So that hopefully I'll be able to do a clever trick with a cable tie, which I've just thought of. Right, so I propose to pull this cable tie tight, holding this in the right place. I just found that the body mounts on the Slash are adjustable, so I've slammed them down as low as they'll go. And ProLine and Traxxas have worked very well together because it doesn't interfere with the suspension action at all. We're now at the stage of talking about finishing touches. Obviously I like a driver figure in my cars, so that will have to be attended to. But I've also started thinking about another matter. Hubcaps. Here in Europe there are widely available chocolate eggs called Kinder eggs. I don't think they're available in the US. These eggs are hollow chocolate eggs, and they contain a plastic egg inside, which in turn contains some sort of little toy for kids that they can assemble. It's supposed to be educational and teach kids to put things together. As far as I know, they're banned in the States because the FDA prohibits supplying children with little tiny parts that are choking hazards. However, the empty plastic eggs are very useful. They're great for keeping SD cards and memory cards in when you're out filming. And also, all these hubcaps are made out of these eggs. I just cut the ends off with a Dremel and glue them directly to the wheel nut. I've cut the ends from each egg and got the resultant concave little bits of plastic and sprayed them a bit murky, and I'm hoping they'll look reasonable once they're glued in position. I think I need to trim them a little. But that's the sort of idea. I wish they weren't so glossy. I've run out of matte paint. As is the case with most of my RC car builds, I now need to find a volunteer to drive the car for me. This isn't as easy as it sounds, because the volunteer, although they get to drive a really cool Slash, also has to be cut in half to fit inside. So you can understand that I'm not too keen. This guy's no good, because he's already driving this Charisma. What about him? He doesn't look like the sort of dude who'd be driving a hot rod to me. When I bought him, I had him in mind for the MGB, some old British classic car. Chick? Well, there's a problem here. When I started playing GTA, I'd be quite happy to sight in a new rifle on a random stranger, but I could never bring myself to shoot women. And since I've been putting RC figures in cars, I've always noticed that I can never bring myself to cut up the female figures. I suppose a psychologist would find that interesting. I'm quite happy to chop up the blokes. Ooh, I think we've just found our volunteer, ladies and gentlemen. And he doesn't look overly pleased. So, this patient requires no anaesthetic. Could you just put your arms up, please, mate? Cheers. Now, I promise, you'll hardly feel a thing. So after I chopped him in half, I glued an improvised thin steel wire steering wheel into his hands with super glue, and now I'm going to stick him on top of the battery box with 2-part epoxy. As I'm used to working with hard ABS bodies, I usually put a bridge across the inside of the body of popsicle stick and screw my drivers to that so I can remove them easily and change them, take them out of the car if I'm filming and I want to have a standing figure of the same driver driving by the car. But this is a basher. I don't think I'll be doing any great filmmaking with this, so I'm just going to glue him to the battery box and he'll be stuck to it until, sorry, not battery box, receiver box, and he'll be stuck to it until I get round to going over to 2.4 gigahertz. Just wanted to check that he actually fits before the glue goes hard. There he is. Obviously it's a bummer being cut in half, but then he does get to spend the rest of his existence driving this incredibly cool Slash hot rod. Other things I wanted to mention. Firstly, I should explain that the front bull bar does in fact come off very easily. I simply had to remove these 2 bolts. Secondly, I've gone ahead and painted my suspension a murky brown colour because it does stick out of the sides of the body. You do really see it, and I thought it was worth it. Another little thing I've done is to paint the speed controller, motor, servo and any wires that might show through the windows a dark neutral colour. I can only think of one thing left to do now, and that is to arrange some sort of switch for the speed controller. At the moment I've just got two wires twisted together, stretching towards the only place I can think of to mount a switch. I want to be able to switch it on and off without removing the body, and the only place I can think of to put that switch is here. The body is of course designed for this chassis. It fits so snugly all the way around that there's nowhere I can just glue it to the side of the chassis without interfering with the body. So that's the only place I can think of to put a switch which I can reach without removing the body. Apart from that, it's finished. Once I've done that, all I really want to do is get myself some black body clips. The only ones I've got are bright shiny chrome. I suppose I could try painting them. I don't want chrome body clips. I'm a bit saddened that it came out so glossy. Paint which dries matte on hard ABS seems to dry satin on Lexan. So it's the only body I could get. There wasn't an ABS alternative. I had to use the ProLine Lexan body. I even thought before I cut it out of filling the whole thing with plaster of Paris, taking that out and then forming an ABS body over the top. But I've gone with painting the Lexan body. It's good enough. Once it's covered in dust and tumbling end over end at 30 miles an hour, I'm sure I won't notice the difference.